So many people have never seen this before. And even with Apple Vision Pros out there and all these other great headsets, they look at our stuff and go, this is incredible. And it really is slick and it just works. And that's amazing to me.
Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Go HandsFree with me and my good friend and colleague James Woodall. James, what are we talking about today?
Really good chat. We spoke to Dr. Chris Parkinson, CEO, founder of RealWear. Talked about the history, how RealWear started, some of the early prototypes. Really got deep into some of the tech, which I like, and also about what the future looks like. And yeah, it was a really great conversation.
Definitely worth a watch. Probably one of our longest pods to date as well. So I think we should celebrate that.
Yeah. All right. Let's get right into it.
Cool. Let's go. Ian, thanks for joining us all again today. Joined by our CEO, founder and leader, Dr. Chris P. Thanks for joining us, Chris. We've got a few questions for you today, putting you on the spot. James, do you want to add any more context? Anything?
Yeah, sure. I guess for maybe people who aren't too familiar with RealWear or who you are, who we are. I mean, who are you, and how did you get involved in this crazy journey?
Well, good. Hello, anyway, George, James. Thanks for that lead in. Who am I? How do I get involved? How long have we got? Do you want the full 4-day version, or do you want something a little bit?
We could tell our audience to skip ahead. That's
okay. Right. I'm Chris Parkinson. Good to meet you. Born and bred in the mighty island of England, but living in the US for 26 years, somewhat by accident. I came out for a 2-year postdoctoral position, and that 2 years stayed into boy meets girl. Next minute, you've got the American dream going on. You've got the family, the wife, the house, the dogs, the minivan, and everything like that. But so the journey really started then when I moved after the US, after leaving Manchester in England. And my background at that point was in chemistry. I have a degree in honours chemistry, then a PhD in theoretical and computational chemistry. And that's what brought me out to the US. But has nothing to do with what I do today. Left that way behind me. Especially the chemistry. It turned out I was never that good at it. I kept spilling stuff on my hands and coming home with blisters. Didn't like that. But that's a different story for a different day. Fast forward, I've really been involved in computer science for a long time. In fact, strangely enough, in the back of my office, if you don't mind a few props, I'll show you something that got me started. Yeah. This is something I rescued from my parents' home recently.
Oh, wow.
This is what got me started back in 1982. This is a Dragon 32 home computer. In the US, the equivalent was the Tandy TRS-80, called the Trash 80 by the aficionados. That's what I got started on back in 1982 when I was a wee bairn. And I got more into software programming at that point. And I created my first software at the age of 15 that I sold to the burgeoning UK market. And that was a piece of software to do a user interface on music creation. So I was actually able to write, we took a Microsoft music engine that was running on the thing that would actually programmatically play lovely harmonic music, but there was no way to put music into it. So I wrote a user interface to allow you to drag and drop notes. Well, not drag and drop, but with the keys and so write and annotate musical scores. And that was pretty cool. Sold that, made some money. I think the pricey sum of £50 at the time, which as a kid was awesome. But it got published, picked up and published. So then I went off and did all my other stuff, but I was actually very into the computing scene at the time. I was writing editorials for home computing magazines, and I had colleagues in the US that would send me latest games from America that we'd then duplicate and share amongst friends. I believe it was slightly illegal at the time, but now it's horrendously illegal. But that's what a lot of people did. Fast forward, that got me on into my university life. I did this chemistry degree, didn't really enjoy it, excelled more at the computing side. And after I did my undergraduate, I took a year off to do something more substantial with my computing, and that was to write a version of Microsoft Word for chemists, which I'd seen was available on the Macintosh at the time, and I wrote it for the Atari, which I'd moved on to the Atari computer then. And that was great. It was a really nice bit of software that could actually use a mouse to drag and drop chemical formula on like a Word document and annotate it. And that was purchased by a company in the UK and then sold as well. So that was my second published piece of software. And that was the key to get me in to do my PhD. My PhD was a combination of chemistry and computing, and I needed some entry to say you are capable of software. And so I wrote the software, got published, and they said, welcome in. Here's a PhD course that is sponsored by Fujitsu supercomputers to do what it turned out to be was molecular visualization. So I was working for the computational chemistry group and theoretical group in Manchester, where there was lots of number crunching going on using supercomputers to simulate chemical equations that couldn't be done in the lab, either because they're too dangerous or they just physically didn't happen. And these supercomputers would churn out bazillions of reams of numbers. And my job was to take that number and represent it graphically. So this is back in the it was like 92, 93, when you weren't used to seeing a lot of stuff, but those 3D molecules you see on the Discovery Channel on a regular basis, that's what I ended up doing, making those 3D models in an early day. So I've really always been fascinated in computing. I'm really into the computer graphics and the user interface side of things.
Was that with like the silicon graphics workstations, like those types of things?
Exactly. In fact, it was. And in fact, I remember at the time there was Evans and Sutherland and also Silicon Graphics. But we had a headset at the time, a 3D headset that allowed you to do 3D graphics, really expensive piece of kit. And they even had a glove on there to give you vibration feedback. So you could actually put a molecule apart and feel the vibes on it and feel the strength.
That was in 92.
Yeah, that's right. Just as Netscape Navigator was appearing, right, and things like that. Early days of that was Mosaic actually software. But that was a lot of fun, but it really was sort of fairly groundbreaking in those days.
It still doesn't feel like we've actually got to that point yet. The idea that you can have a virtual reality headset with like haptic feedback. I know people talked about it, but I'm not sure if that even is a thing today. I don't know.
I guess the gamers do that all now.
Yeah,
chair vibrates at the same time. But that was fun. So that was another bit of software that got published then to the University of Manchester, to other universities around the world. So that was rather fun. And then that took me off to the US, and I did more of that in the US for the Department of Energy, but then got more drawn away by the computing side and less of the chemistry. And long story short, that took me down to Silicon Valley to do a startup in the radio frequency identification, RFID. How did I get into there? I got more into these micro devices at the time and distributed computing through my gig doing a postdoc. And we were doing all this work for the Department of Defense, where the dream was you'd fly over a battlefield and you'd throw out a dime-sized device that was a Bluetooth self-assembling network that would be a sensor, pick up information about the battlefield and relay it in a mesh to the next device, which would go to the next one. And so you could throw out these things almost like you're sowing corn in a field, throw them all out and they'd all wake up, sniff data and send it all back. So I did a lot of that work for the US Department of Defense.
So that sounds like you invented the AirTag.
Well, this is all stuff that we did at the time. It was a lot of fun.
Wow.
And then also got software on one of the spacecraft that was launched at the Goddard Space Center. So that was another gig we had. So I did a lot of fun for 5 years at the research lab, but then left to do startup to do radio frequency identification. And long story short, that company was called Alien Technology. That was led by a guy called Jeff Jacobson at the time, who was the CEO. He left in 2003. I left to start up my first company after that to do consulting and professional services around radio frequency identification and deploying that. And about 5 years later, I got a phone call from this Jeff Jacobson guy to say, hey, Chris, I'm looking for someone who can do software, can do firmware. I'm putting together a small band of brothers at a company called Copin in Boston. And I said, oh, that sounds interesting. What's going on? He says, well, I want to make a headset computer. What do you want to do that for, Jeff? And if you ever meet Jeff, you know this has been a long story. But he actually basically said, look, I work for this company, Copin. We make these tiny micro displays that are being used in camera recorders and the like. And I've suggested to the CEO that the time is right to put a whole headset together, a whole computer around there. And I've got this guy, Steve Pombo, who's my designer.
Was when? This was like, I think it's 2006,
2007 when we had this conversation, yeah.
Wow.
So I said, sure, Jeff, I'll do that. So I up and left, and I stay where I am, where I live in Washington State, but I worked remotely for Jeff and Steve Pombo on this program, which was called the GoldenEye headset initially, and that's the first of the headsets. I won't claim to invent the headset. Jeff and Steve had already conceived this idea of putting together a whole computer, but they needed someone to do the software and the firmware. And where I came in is to basically look at the whole usability, the UX of this. Because they were very good at saying, let's have a display hanging off your face and a computer, but how are we going to interact with it? So I came in and I drove the speech recognition, the noise cancellation, the user interface around the whole headset thing. And the three of us worked for years at Copin to develop the prototypes of the RealWear headset today. I will pause for commercial break now. I've just been talking for 20 minutes.
No, that's great. I mean, there's some really interesting things there. I think when you get given a device with an absolutely brand new form factor, which, you know, what you and I do on a daily basis, we're just used to creating these hands-free user experiences. But how did you go about taking this headset computer and trying to figure out, well, how do we actually make it work?
By, I guess, research over the years, you've sort of been playing with all these things. I think the key at that point was nuance. Nuance technologies were there advertising things like Dragon Naturally Speaking in those days, saying you can now interact with your computer via voice. Yeah. So I think that was really the big breakthrough here, to work with them and to find out they've actually been working on smaller embedded versions of their speech recognizer to work on small devices, which would be perfect. So now I've got a display. I could use speech recognition. So now I need a microphone added to my device. Great, I need a speaker. You start to add all these things and start to experiment. And at that time, it was Linux based. There was no Android. Android hadn't been invented at that point. It was Linux or Windows CE, Windows Embedded. And we got to try all these things out, really on desktops. And then it's about user interface. All right, I've got this tiny little display, which is still a problem that we have today. I don't want lots of information. I just need what I need to get my job done. So from day one, the device had always been conceived to be a hands-free tool for workers. It was never a consumer. It was always going to be workers. It was always going to be rugged, always for the person who needed that hands-free. I've got gloves on, I've got tools in my hand, and I need to get on with work, but I need information. That story hasn't changed since 2007, bizarrely enough.
Do you remember the first app you ever built and then ran on a wearable computer and felt like, wow, we've got something here? There must have been that, because obviously the hardware design is one element, but then once you've applied that user interface on top, did you ever have that wow moment where you all sat around and went, we've got something here because this actually really works?
I think so. I think that really you're going back to about probably the first working prototypes appeared about 2009. And these were things that we took to CES. They worked for 20 minutes before the battery got so hot and the whole thing got too hot to handle. But it worked enough to show people. And I think having the first versions of the nuance voice recognizer working so that I could see 3 or 4 icons on the screen, I could read their names out, and I would get acknowledgement, and it did something. That was pretty incredible to see that. And then at the time, there was no concept of a camera on the device. There was no Wi-Fi. Even Wi-Fi wasn't really around at that point. But what we did have was Bluetooth connection to a phone. And when we saw video being streamed over Bluetooth to the headset under voice command, I think then you start to go, wow, here's something really happening now. And that was pretty cool. That was 2009-ish time.
Wow.
Oh,
And
wow.
then from that, I guess, working prototype. How
Yeah, then
did
we
you
did
get
a
started?
number of different prototypes there. We were working with Texas Instruments on their Da Vinci chipset under Linux, and a lot of groundbreaking stuff. Then we moved to Windows embedded, Windows CE. At that point, we realized we need more help. Enter James Woodall and team. That's where we met James for about 2008, 9-ish. Because at that point, we were not much different from where we are today. We need software, and we need Microsoft's help, right? And Microsoft was just showing off this thing called Sideshow technology. Sideshow was an attempt at Microsoft to say, here's your PC, we're running everything, but there are going to be accessory devices nearby that need to communicate and take a version of what you're looking at on the big PC and show you a cut down version for the smaller screen. So it seemed like a natural fit for our GoldenEye headset to be a Sideshow device. And so when we started looking around for who's doing this, James popped up with a company he was running at the time, saying they've just announced their partnership with Microsoft to do Sideshow. So we tracked him down, chased him down to a small village called Battle, which is next to Hastings, which is named after the Battle of Hastings. And we said, James, can you help? He goes, of course you can help. So that's how we started working with James a long time ago. It was really our first software addition to the team.
I think if I remember the early conversations, and we're going back, I had more hair way back then. I think the goal, or Jeff's idea, was he wanted to stand on stage and give a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation, and control it hands-free through voice. And I can certainly see that he's a bit of a showman, and I can definitely see him doing that. And that would have made a really great, compelling demo. Whether that has actual use, I don't know in the field. I'm not sure.
We've got some cracking demos there, and it was really to ignore the man behind the curtain because we were last minute. And quick, I think the Bluetooth link is working great. Okay, get on stage and go for it. And boom, it worked. We got away with some scary demos, but nothing ventured, nothing gained.
So at this point, you've got a good solid hardware foundation. The early days of the software are starting to come through. And then at what point did you actually start to engage in commercial conversations and start to expand out into it being productized as a real, I mean, obviously it didn't launch officially till 2016. So there's still a few years of gap here before officially, globally available product. But I guess, do you remember any of those early commercial conversations, and at what point did they start?
It's almost as if you planned that question for me, because I'm sporting my lovely outfit. You can see this HC1.
Yeah. Very good.
HC1 represents the first commercial outing of the headset. The GoldenEye headset, we evolved to about 2011, and Jeff really was the business partner and the visionary here, with Steve Pombo being the industrial designer, the great Steve Pombo that still works for RealWear, and we've been with him all ever since, and myself doing the software and the firmware. And Jeff had actually been out working with a company called Motorola at the time, Motorola Solutions, out of New York, who subsequently got bought by Zebra. So Motorola, that was our first licensee. They looked at it and said, fantastic, we're going to take this, we're going to spend a year making a rugged version for warehousing, and we're going to go and take this to the world. And that's what HC1 was. They launched it branded as the headset computer number one. Huge imagination in that naming. But we worked for a solid year. James was involved with the team as well. We did a lot of IP exchange with the Motorola team. Tom Bianculli is now the CTO at Zebra, was running the show there with Nicole Trikukas, who's still, I believe, working there. Big advocates of this. And I have to say, running into that, we thought we'd made it. Great, we've got the mighty Motorola to take this device, and off they went. But they came back after a year, and unfortunately, I think failed to capture the essence of the device. They spent so much time ruggedizing it, they'd added a lot of weight to it and forgot that this was meant to be worn on someone's head. And they ended up with this thing that weighed nearly like 2 kilos on the head. And that is the HD1, and we still have them. They're in the museum. You can probably find them on eBay. They sold a few, but it wasn't the rip-roaring success that we were hoping for. So that sort of closed down that avenue of commercial viability, and we came back to Copin and we redid it. And that's when the next generation of GoldenEye was born. That's when we started adding the camera for the first iteration. I think at that point we realized this live camera streaming would be critical for everything we did. The nice thing about all these years up front is that we were able to write patents after patent after patent around this technology because no one else was doing this. Google Glass wasn't even announced at that point. So I've got over 50 patents awarded in the space, and there's more coming. James has a whole bunch. There's a lot of really good stuff there. But anyway, so then we went forward and we tried another couple of iterations. We tried to license to Fujitsu Corporation, who then had a go at making our GoldenEye. They had awful trouble making the microphones work when they came to do mass production. So they decided to drop the speech recognition from the device and just have a device you wore on the head with a display and a camera, and they equipped their workers with a big armband with a keyboard on there to drive it. So unfortunately, they went from a fully hands-free device to a device that required both hands to operate. Therefore, essence of program disappeared. So that went off, and that didn't do so well.
Was it hard to stay focused on that mission of true hands-free, all-day hands-free? There must have been loads of instances where deviations, and we still see it today, where people are trying to blend other experiences and devices into the user experience. So, I mean, was it hard to stay laser focused throughout, to stay true to that all-day hands-free belief?
I think we knew we needed to. The challenge has always been you need to get other people to get their software on the device, and they're going to have to rewrite their software for hands-free to get away from all the buttons and the widgets. And therein lies the challenge, because unless you prove this is a multi-million-dollar market, people aren't going to put the resources to write their software yet. It's a chicken and the egg. So we've had that challenge all the way through. So that's why James's team was then built up by Copin to be a software team of about 26 people to write software to start stimulating this market. So that's right, isn't it, James? About 26 people.
I don't think we could say it was a success. Look, we learned a lot. I think that certainly some of the things that we discovered back then are still applied today, but I just don't think the market was quite there at that time. But we are where we are today, and I think we're better for it.
There's a lot of learnings for sure. So it got to the point where 2024 came along, and Copin had tried a couple of instances to license this out, and it became apparent that this is a very difficult thing to do for some other group to take, to learn the nuances of all the stuff we learned about the hands-free, the balance, the wearability, the UX. It's such a complicated device. And getting it all right, everyone we tried to transfer the IP to, they missed one key element, and then ended up with a failure, basically. So I think Copin then said, you know what, all right, we've spent enough money on this. It's put up or shut up time, sort of thing. So I said, well, I still have passion and believe that we're going to do this. There's enough. We built 250 prototypes ourselves, and people love them out there. I think there's a market. So in 2015, I left Copin, and the next 6 months I spent working with Copin lawyers to pull an IP license out of Copin so that we could then practice the art and carry this forward. So in 2015, I started the company WearNext with a clever spelling of WearNext. That's a bit of a pun on where we're going next with wearables. Too clever, apparently, so we changed the name later. But what I found myself there is that I had no money, I had no team, I had myself, I had a vision and a desire to go forward, but I had an IP license. And long story short, because it really is a longer story, I then got hold of Andy Lowry, who was running at DACRI as another headset group. He was president there, and said, Andy, I need someone to run RealWear for me as the CEO. I want to be the tech guy. I don't want to be the CEO. And he said, sure, come on board. So we hired him on board, and he brought in two of the other co-founders, Sanjay and Brian Hamilton. And in 2016, we renamed the company RealWear. and we basically said this is the new entity. And the reason we renamed it is because Andy had brought in some money. He brought in some seed money from the Chinese friends of his who had a company called Real Maps. So we said to show this collaboration between China and America, let's take half of their name, half of the Wear Next name, and we merged that and we became RealWear. And the logo today of RealWear is still the inverted Real Maps logo, the M. You can see. So it has caused confusion over the years. And in fact, Real Maps were part of our story for a couple more years after that. But then we sort of cleaned up in one of our subsequent fundraisers. They disappeared from our cap table. We got bought out, and we took the Chinese entity off the RealWear cap table. So the bottom line, we really got going in 2016 under RealWear, and the fundraising began. And off we became on the story that we are today.
So the first device that RealWear came out with was the HMT1, a device that we certainly know and love. You were building that, obviously, with all the knowledge that you had from the Kopin days, and you had the license from Kopin. This was the first time that you were manufacturing, because you're right, before it was Fujitsu, then it was Motorola. Now it's Chris Parkinson time. What part of it was a bit harder than you thought?
It's probably easier than I thought in a way, because we were able to bring in, when we formed RealWear, Sanjay Jawa, unfortunately deceased and departed at this point now, but he brought in a whole team. He came from a company called Sonim. Sonim, Sonim, made rugged smartphones, and they were making that in China. So he brought the engineering team and their engineering prowess into RealWear. And so from day one, we had a team that we could then manufacture in China, doing rugged devices. And they brought in the great Yavor and Yasen Kolev, the Kolev twins, who ran the engineering organization, and every month flew to China from America to manage that relationship. So actually, with that team in place, this became a lot easier than I thought it would ever be, because they had years of knowledge. But frustratingly, I want to show you this device from the archives. This is the final one that Steve Pombo did at Kopin. This is called the Gen 3.8L. And it's a very nice little device. It's got an OMAP processor in there running Android at this point, and it just wears over the head. Wonderful big display. Really is a slick looking device. What this transferred into is this beast. The beast is the first HMT1. It's bigger, it's heavier, it's everything I didn't really want. I like this, I wanted this.
Okay, yeah.
Boom, we got this. A lot heavier. And the reason is that this wasn't rugged. If I drop this, it breaks. It was hand built. It was never designed to be industrialized. And by the time our team had spent industrializing, we came up with this thing, which was too heavy for my liking. But I believe that now we've gone on to the next generation of headset within RealWear. We've got closer to this again now with our Navigator 500. So a lot happy about where we are. But as far as, sorry.
The HMT was, or the HMT1 was heavy, but still widely adopted, and at the time, still probably is one of the most widely adopted wearable, certainly rugged wearable devices in the world. And still being used by some huge enterprise customers. So, I mean, were you too critical, or
Of course.
Were you just
I think a father is always critical of their children. No, you're right. I mean, even to this day, we as engineers will look at this stuff and go, "Oh my God, that's terrible! It's terrible." But for those people who have not been around this and they see it for the first time, they're like, "Wow!" And that still amazes me. After all these years, I've been giving the same demos. For those who know me have still seen the same Iron Man videos on my headset since 2011. And you still put it on people's heads today who've never seen this, and you say, my camera, and they go, chirp, my camera pops up, and they go, wow. And you show them a document and a video, and the amazing it's flabbergasting to me that they're still amazed after all these years. We've lived this so long, we're bored of giving the same demos. But so many people have never seen this before. And even with Apple Vision Pros out there and all these other great headsets, they look at our stuff and go, this is incredible. And it really is slick and it just works. And that's amazing to me.
I was going to say there must be. Is there an element of pride because the amount of money RealWear's spent and the market that's been created with RealWear. You look at some of the other investments that have gone out into wearable computing, XR, and other devices. And I mean, if you're looking at a return on the money that's gone in for the market that's been created, do you ever have any reflection time, or are you just too busy to even reflect and you're always going forward to the next thing?
I would say pride, yeah, immense amount of pride, but frustration as well. That you people like your HoloLens and your Magic Leaps have spent billions. I think Magic Leap was recorded at 4.5 billion, and HoloLens is in the billions. And collectively, as a RealWear company, we have, through the history of this, we've probably spent about 200 million, right, over the years. So you think about that, think how far we've come. And it is frustrating that these people get to spend so much money and not do much with it. And here we have to, every day it seems to be a fight. And we know we've got a really awesome device and a really awesome solution and a really awesome company, but I just feel frustrated that no one knows about us. So that's the frustration. It's the marketing dollars maybe we don't have, and that big name brand, it's getting a lot better now, thankfully.
No. Has that been a learning curve for you, coming from a technical background, now the CEO of the company? I guess you've had to learn some new disciplines on the way. Any of them challenging or interesting?
Well, patience is one of them, amongst all things. Patience managing a company and managing people. I guess the big mindset difference from being an engineer to not being an engineer is acknowledging the customer is probably right. Well, as an engineer, the customer's always wrong. They haven't got a clue what they're talking about. Now you have to actually say, yeah, you're right. I may not believe it, but you're right. We'll solve that. And so that is a bit of a mindset change. But it is wonderful to see it's not just about a device. It never has been about a device, but when you're engineering it, that's what you think about. Now you get to step back and go, it's about the ecosystem. It's about the user. It's about the value the user gets and the value the business gets around it. It's so much more than just a technology device. And I think that's when you look at the people in our sphere, our competitors, the ones that have been and gone, for them it's always just been a device. Whether it's HoloLens, whether it's Magic Leap, and all these other Google Glasses, it's never been about the whole thing, the whole solution. I think that's where we've done a good job over the years in building out that portfolio.
So we come up to today, and obviously we've now got the Navigator 520, we've got the Navigator Z1. What for you is the thing you're most proud of from the HMT1 to the Navigator series? Because if someone were to look at the two of them, they look almost the same, but obviously internally, and a lot has changed. But if you could pick kind of one thing that you've maybe fixed or improved, as we move into the current generation.
No, I think I wouldn't like to do that. I think the Navigator is actually a whole combination of improvements that we needed to make. For example, the bigger display. That's always been a problem for people. The smaller display we've had in the past, we've got a bigger one. It's great. The modularity is fascinating. It's a wonderful concept. The fact I can take a camera, plug on a different camera, plug in different batteries and do this and that. The end user doesn't care. That's an engineering proudness moment that really doesn't affect the scheme of things. But then the strange thing is the same core, maybe one of the things I'm proud of is that the core inventions from 2007 are still here. The famous chirp, the Star Trek communicated chirp that we have on our device, where when you speak something, you get that acknowledgement. The basic speech engine, the noise cancellation, the basics haven't changed. And that is good and bad. It's good because I believe that's a testament to the fact that we got the basic design right in the first place. Yeah. It could be bad that maybe we're stuck in our way and we're not changing things, but I think it generally works. So I like that. That's what I'm proud of.
We've talked a lot about like the engineering, the hardware, the past. Now, today, how these devices are actually being used. We've seen customers and partners of all shapes and sizes use our device in lots of different ways. What for you is the most or one of the most exciting use cases that you're seeing people use hands-free computing or our device?
Yes. I will actually step back and broaden that and say, on the software side, I think we've done a lot of great stuff in using the camera to do two-way video like Teams and Zoom. That's great. But for years, people have wanted to do more with our headset. They've wanted to do their day-to-day operations within work, their checklisting, their workflow solutions. Many software companies have tried to deliver this, but the user interaction model is just fundamentally wrong for a lot of this. Having to try and navigate through checklists using voice has just failed. And so we've never really got that broad adoption that gives you all-day usage. Where I'm excited about now is some of the AI language models that have come over in the last year or so. This ability now just to talk naturally to the headset, not just give it a command based on a response, but just to talk openly and have the language model extract and infer meaning from there and turn that into action. What does that mean? It means that the software that we're starting to see come now allows me to put the headset on, and this headset becomes my passive friend in a way. I can be doing my job, I can be inspecting my car and talking about it and saying, hey, the left tire's at 34 psi, the oil needs replacing, it's a third full, and just talking. And in the meantime, the AI is capturing that information through the microphones, turning that into inference and into real actions, or maybe form filling, and maybe firing off work orders. I think that is the change for us, the pivot moment where we become not just a break-fix device that has emergency video calling for when I need it, to now my all-day companion. It also means the technology can start to disappear from me, because now it's voice. I'm just talking, it's talking back to me mainly, maybe the camera's there watching things. I don't need a display in front of my face for the most part. And fundamentally, I believe people don't want things hanging off their face. So if this now allows me to blend the technology into the background, I think that is the most exciting future for RealWear and for our frontline workforce.
I think if we're not careful, George, this is going to become the AI podcast, because I think every episode, AI seems to somehow make an appearance. Obviously, I'm a great believer.
It's hard to ignore, but I'm not sure we should release a product called Passive Friend AI. I'm not sure that's going to land as well as something like Copilot, but we could try.
I'm not in marketing, George, but thank you for that.
No, that's great. So I guess we should look to the future a bit, really. I mean, in terms of everything that's around us today, you've mentioned Vision Pro. There's a couple of other totally different types of devices and whatever. Where do you think the market's heading?
I'd be amiss to not acknowledge the huge swell forward from the smart glasses. There's a lot of money being spent at that, a lot of vision behind it. The technology that's driving is really good. Is that right for us at the moment? We've been watching very carefully the smart glass. We're not ready to launch our own smart glasses yet, because I don't believe the technology is ready and mature enough to allow me to wear this for an all-day shift in a rugged environment on a frontline workplace. I think we will take some of the technology that's been evolved and bury that into our next few products. But it doesn't mean we're going to come out with smart glasses per se. There's still a lot of reasons that the glass form factor is not right for my worker bees. But we're watching very carefully, and there's some really cool stuff coming there. But I think at the end of the day, the more of this AI interaction model comes along, the less I need a display. Which now means, whereas glasses were super important 2 years ago, maybe they're starting to lose some of their need to have something in my face all day long. We'll see. Now that could be I got that one wrong, but we'll see where that goes. No, we're definitely not rushing. We're not driven by tech anymore, even though if you look back at our history, all this was all about tech. I think we've learned enough now to say we're delivering tools that can be used by frontline workers today. And I'm not putting a brand new widget on this device just for the sake of the tech, because then we get stuck in the innovation lab and we're just a new toy. We are a hammer. I want to be out there being used every day. And I want to have rugged, reliable hardware and software that just works and is not the greatest leading edge tech.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? Follow the customers and listen to your customers and understand the real problems that need to be solved. And I guess on that point, Chris, I mean, if you could pick one moment from your entire RealWear journey, is there one thing that stands out? I mean, we didn't touch on COVID. I'm not saying COVID was the highlight of anyone's life, but COVID had a huge impact on this business. And are there any moments that really stand out for you as being amazing or stand out in any way?
So many ups and downs. This has been an incredible journey so far, and I believe we're just getting going again, actually. It's changing. Yeah, there's a whole book to be written of all the different crazy events that we've had. COVID was huge for us. That did flip the company around overnight for the demand of, I think was one of our head of sales at the time said, before COVID, we had to explain why we've got a headset, what does it do? After COVID, we never need to explain that again. People just know it does Microsoft Teams. So that was a nice moment in adoption and openness. But I think, there's just not one single event, George. Obviously, meeting George and James here, our host, was a very important part of the journey forward.
Of course, yeah.
Very diplomatically answered. I like that.
Yeah, no, that's very good. Now, as we kind of come up to the end of 2024, we've just announced the acquisition of Alma, which is a very big event and certainly been something that you've been working on for quite some time. What do you think that means for the industry and kind of how we as RealWear kind of look forward?
Lots of great things come from this acquisition. Number one, this team from Switzerland, the Armour team, they have a nice device. They have the same vision as we do. They want hands-free, easy-to-use compute. And they were able to start this journey just 3 years ago. And they started by looking at RealWear. They looked at Google Glass. They looked at everything and said, great idea, but how can we do it better? So in a way, they were unencumbered by all the baggage we've got over the years, and we're able to do things from scratch. And they came up with something very nice and elegant, which we like. So we're very happy that that's part of the RealWear story now. And over the next 6 to 9 months, we are RealWearizing their device, and we'll launch it again in the second half of next year with all the great RealWear values of rugged, always working, always on type of solution. But it's still going to be super easy to use. What they've done is they've basically said, I've got a headset, it comes preloaded with software, only one application, turn it on, it just works. And people like that because we, as RealWear, have over-engineered our device. We've got a computer that does lots of things, and you have to turn on the computer, then tell it what to do, and launch the right application. That's confusing if you just want a hammer. So the Armour guys have really sort of nailed that bit. The other interesting thing that they bring to the table is their go-to-market strategy. We've always sold our device like a Dell laptop. You buy the laptop and then you choose what software goes onto it and off you go. And that's how we sell our RealWear device. We sell it to partners who load up the software and take it to the customer. And we just get one payment for that. We sell the device. The Armour team say, different model, we're going to do our device as a subscription. So we're going to let people buy our device, or rent it rather. It comes pre-built with software. I can ship it to you in the mail. It comes, you turn it on, it's ready to go. There's no customization required. And I'm going to charge you on a month-to-month basis to give you recurring revenue. So that's something we've been talking about for a long time, but we've got so much baggage, we've got so many customers out there, we can't just flip our business model overnight. So the acquisition of Alma and their device and their team allows us to bring in a new device with this new sales motion and not conflict with the old one. So we can run both sales models together now, and we can evaluate which one wins. And then we can make a movement from there. So it's quite nice that we get a new device that is a lightweight device in our portfolio. It's not ultra rugged. It fits in this more healthcare warehousing market where we're being pulled into right now, but we probably aren't the right form factor. So we have a new form factor to go there, and we have a new sales model to take it to market with. And we also bring in a really innovative young team to drive the passion and innovation within RealWear again. So it's a win on multiple levels for us.
Oh, perfect. Nice. That's really exciting.
It's exciting times.
I think so. I think, and then plus our investment from TeamViewer, a $2 billion company. It's a testament. I think it's a message to the industry to say to everyone that you may have been hit by companies that have disappeared overnight before. TeamViewer is here to stand behind RealWear and Alma to make sure there is one solution for hardware, one solution for software, and it's backed by big pockets. They're not going out of business. They're here to stay. So you can now start to do your digital transformation with confidence.
Okay. Oh,
Perfect.
anything else you want to add, Chris? Or
No, I think that's the public message out and broadcast.
oh, fantastic.
That's just fun, James. Thanks for telling the story. There's a lot more stories to tell, I have to say, but
sure.
I've already taken enough of your time.
I would love to have you back on again, Chris, if you want to do a story time part 2. That'd be pretty exciting.
Well, James, that was lots of information.
That was, yeah.
Super interesting. I didn't know half of those stories. If it seemed staged in any way, it absolutely wasn't. What did you make of it?
It was really good, and I'm very grateful that you weren't slapping the table all the way through that as well. So clearly, we're improving our podcasting abilities. So
Okay.
thank you for that. But no, that was a great chat with Chris. And although I've been certainly in the RealWear family for a long time, there were some of those little nuggets of information that were new to me, and it's amazing to hear how the story kind of fit together, because people just look at what we've got today. And there's so many decisions and thought processes and successes and failures that got us to where we are. And I think you need to know where you've been to know where you're going.
Yeah, it's nice to have that historical context, I think, because
Definitely.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in tech, and tech moves so fast these days that you sometimes think, people have, just boomed and got lucky in a way. But RealWear is definitely the amount of effort that's gone into getting to where it is right now. I mean, just hearing Chris talk about it, it does make you feel quite proud to work here,
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, definitely.
So enjoyed that one, and you've got to do your thing. You need to.
I do have to do. So
subscribe thing.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks all for getting to however many minutes into this podcast this one is. But thanks for listening to the end. Please subscribe, like, follow. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and a few others as well. So, yep, really good. And we've got a great lineup of people coming in the next few weeks as well. So please stay tuned to Go HandsFree.